Sustainable food and cooking are things that I'm really enthusiastic about. So thank you all for coming along to sharing that interest with me today. Today's session will be a little bit of a mashup. I'm going to start off by sharing some ideas, some top tips and tricks to reduce our everyday impact on the environment and hopefully live in a way that's more beneficial to the planet and ourselves. Then I'm going to open the floor for a Q&A session towards the end, and I'll be asking you if you have any green kitchen tips that you'd like to share. I love learning about other people's nifty food habits and hacks, so please do offer up your knowledge if you would like to. Just a little bit about me and why I am here with you today. So, Ovacome is currently in the process of assessing its environmental impact as an organisation, and we're in the process of taking steps to minimise that. And as part of this, we're wanting to start conversations around sustainability in our community and really highlight things that we can all do on a sort of daily basis to lighten our carbon footprint, as at the end of the day, climate change affects all of us and directly relates to issues of health and well-being. Beyond Ovacome, I've been involved with sustainable food and growing projects in London and further afield for the last couple of years. I'm a very keen forager and gardener and also love cooking. And in 2021, I completed a master's in the anthropology of food. So this is very much my cup of tea. Just a quick disclaimer as well. I am not a dietitian or a food professional in any way. These hacks are all going to be quite general. So depending on where you are in your diagnosis and treatment, a couple of the things I'm going to mention today may not be suitable for you at this very moment in time. So please do speak to your doctor if you're unsure about whether something's right for you. For those of you who attended Rachel's brilliant webinar, Rachel White, a few weeks ago on sustainable healthy eating, there's going to be a little bit of crossover in terms of subject matter. So do bear with me for those points. But I will have plenty of fresh content to share with you as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what does sustainability look like in the kitchen? Sustainability is all about meeting our needs without compromising future generations' ability to meet theirs at the heart of it. Our food system has the single biggest impact on the climate, affecting every inch of our planet and every creature on it. So, cultivating an awareness of how our food gets to us, how we use it, really is essential if you want to reduce your impact on the planet. For me, the key to sustainable eating is really thinking about how our environment and its ecosystems and its people are all interconnected in a big web of life, and how everything is interdependent. So our food choices have a knock-on effect on all the other elements of the web, which, while on the one hand has pointed to climate change, on the other, it really gives us the power to make small changes that have that broader positive impact. As one of my favourite chefs, Anna Jones, says in her wonderful cookbook, One Pot Pan Planet, which I will be mentioning a little bit later on, how we eat can actually help to shift the world we live in. And beyond that, as I've sort of alluded to, it has that direct relationship with our own health and well-being. Food can really nourish our bodies, but also, I think, our spirits. And just on that point for a second, what's really key for me, and I hope you can take away from today's session, is taking pleasure in being around food, in growing it, cooking it, eating it, and just having that connection with the landscape through it as well. It's really nice to sort of reframe those day-to-day tasks that might be a bit arduous at times, and reframe them as taking a moment for yourself to experiment and be playful with food. And for me, that's all sort of part of creating that more engaged relationship with the world around you. So with all that being said, I'm going to walk you through a by no means exhaustive list of some things that you can do at home, from buying to binning, that will make all the difference. So, a sustainable kitchen really focuses from the outset on choosing nutritious, local, and affordable foods. And quite wonderfully, a lot of sustainable food choices are also good money-saving options and often just common sense as well. So looking at buying and growing food, the first thing you'll want to do is buy and eat a broad range of seasonal produce. Eating different and more unusual varieties of fruit and vegetables, as long with herbs and grains and pulses where possible, is not only a lovely way to mix up your diet, but it's one of the top ways you can actually support biodiversity. So, biodiversity is crucial to both humans and the planet. Eating a wide range of fruit and veg really is key in this. So our industrial food system largely relies on monocultures. So that's farms growing only one type of crop, which can create food insecurity if that crop fails or is hit by disease. So in those cases, because farmers have been responding to market demand and haven't been continuing to grow a wide variety of crops adapted to that particular environment as they would have done historically, we're left with much less to go around in those kind of crisis situations. So, taking it a step further, by buying and eating heritage and native varieties of fruit and vegetables, it not only prevents those lesser known varieties from becoming extinct, but it also helps to increase the security of our food system as a whole, and has the added benefit of recycling different nutrients back into the soil, which helps to regenerate it, which is central to the soil's ability to sustain life and store carbon. So it's part of that sort of web way of thinking. Eating seasonally when UK grown produce is at its peak has the lowest environmental impact, as it doesn't have to travel as far by transport fueled by fossil fuel to get to us, and it's also fresher and tastier, so a benefit on those fronts. So next, if you can, try and eat local produce and support small soil-friendly farmers. As I mentioned, the food and farming system that we support has a huge impact on the world we live in. So that's why, where possible, it's best to buy from local and organic farmers who practice less carbon intensive farming methods, which support biodiversity and soil health, as I was talking about. So I would recommend looking for local veg box schemes that support farmers in your area. In London, where I live, there are loads available. There's Oddbox, Organically, Crop Drop, loads more. And these schemes do exist all over the country. So have a Google if you're interested. The Soil Association have a really great database of box schemes, which I've included in some resource slides at the end of my presentation, which we'll send round to all of you after the session. So no need to write anything down. So do take a look at that if you'd like to know what's in season when. And again, this way of sourcing your veg minimizes fuel emissions from transport and lets you know exactly where your food's coming from. And I think this is really important for shifting our attitudes towards food. At least I know in my case, if I know where my food comes from, it's no longer, for example, just an apple, right? It's a story. It's grown by a person. There's an emotional connection, which means that I respect it more in a way and I'm less likely to waste it. Now, I'm not going to pretend that veg boxes are a super cheap option. They're not, but the more people who can afford to support sustainable farmers that do, the more chance there is, in a knock-on effect kind of way, of these kinds of foods becoming more affordable and accessible to everybody. But beyond veg boxes, if you have a neighbour who grows and sells their own produce, or has chickens and sells the eggs, that's also a wonderful option. As are farmers markets and food co-ops. But if you don't have access to any of those, then just fill your plate with supermarket bought, ideally organic seasonal fruit and veg grown in the UK or Europe, and you'll be doing just fine. So yes, for more information on what veg is in season, there's an odd box list of those things in my resources slides. Moving on to unpackaged foods and bulk buying. This is a more sustainable option. If you take your own bags to the shops, you can buy loose produce which is actually often cheaper as there is a cost to fancy packaging and branding. Plus, you can use your own produce bags to store your food in the fridge and keep everything organized. I like to do that. And another good option for minimizing your waste in terms of packaging is buying tinned foods, as not only do they keep for ages in your cupboard, but tins are highly recyclable. So things like baked beans, chickpeas, chopped tomatoes, that kind of thing. They really cut back on your waste. Another thing that I believe Rachel also highlighted is making the most of apps and websites designed to reduce your food waste. And you can also get yourself some great deals that way on food that would otherwise go to waste. So some of my favorites are Olio, which you can see on screen. And this is an app which connects neighbours with local retailers so that their surplus food can be shared. And then there's also Too Good To Go, which lets cafes and restaurants sell uneaten meals at reduced rates. So some good options there on some nice quality, much cheaper food than you'd be able to buy elsewhere. So next, I'd like to talk about reevaluating your meat, fish, and dairy consumption. Now, whatever your views on eating meat are, if we want to help slow and one day begin to reverse climate change, it is widely agreed that the most powerful thing we can do is eat fewer animals and more plants. I try to eat meat only a few times a week, but a shift for you might look like one meal a day without meat. We're all different, and it's really up to you and about what your body needs and how you feel you can cut back. At the end of the day, any reduction is better than nothing. There are other benefits as well to cutting back on meat and dairy beyond the environmental. So it can significantly reduce the price of your shop. And as far as getting enough protein goes, because I know that's something people worry about when thinking of making these shifts. The truth is that on average in the UK, we eat almost double the protein we need. You can find protein in things like pulses, beans, tofu, eggs, Greek yogurt, nuts, seeds, the list goes on. And these are all brilliant sources for a diet rich in nutrients as well, and fiber and protein. And if you do eat meat, as with the veg, if you can, try and buy your meat from a local producer or a local butcher rather than the supermarket. Next, if you have space for it, consider growing your own veg and herbs. As you can see in this photo of me on the left this summer, I was very chuffed with my first batch of radishes. Growing your own is cheaper. It's the most environmentally friendly way to get your food, and it's a great way just to take that step back and spend time in your garden or on your balcony, even by your windowsill, and to connect with your food as well as yourself. If you are going to go down this route, just be careful that you're buying peat-free compost, and try to avoid chemical pesticides and insecticides. You can make your own quite easily from things that you'll already have at home, things like orange peel and garlic. There are loads of recipes all over the internet, sort of specifying the different ingredients you'll need for various gardening problems. But there's, yeah, plenty of natural alternatives to those things. And if you can, grow heirloom seeds and get your seeds directly from farmers, or look for seed exchanges, or consider trying to collect them locally to you. So that takes me on to my next point, which is to practice seed saving. Seed saving is literally just collecting, storing, and replanting seeds from the plants you or someone you know has grown. And it's really important when it comes to maintaining that diversity of crops adapted to their local environment that I spoke about a bit earlier, particularly with heirloom varieties. So that's seeds with 50 plus years of continuous growth year on year. So planting, harvesting from those plants, the seeds, planting again, etc., etc. There are heaps of benefits to seed saving. So first off, free seeds that you can replant next year. Great. Seed saving reduces your dependency on buying seeds, but it also preserves seed quality. It makes plants more well suited to their climate and resistant to disease. It preserves that genetic diversity of crops alongside rare and unique heirloom varieties. And finally, I think it's just a really nice way to share and swap with your friends if you all, harvest some seeds, get together, have a little seed swap. Um, yeah, a really nice way to spend time with friends, I think. So when and how should you harvest your seeds? You should always harvest seeds in dry weather to prevent mold. But the points at which you need to harvest the seeds of different plants vary slightly. So for vegetables, you're going to want to harvest your seeds when the vegetable is too ripe to eat, but before it goes moldy. For herbs, you're going to want to wait until the seeds have turned brown/black, and they should come off the plant easily. So you should never need to tug at the plant to get them off. For fruit, quite like the veg, you're going to want to wait until the fruit has browned and it's quite soft. And for flowers, you're going to wait until the flower is dry, brown, and sort of shriveled and crispy, and then you'll know it's ready to go. In terms of storing these, if your seeds are covered in fruit or veg pulp from the extraction, you're going to want to wash that away and then just pat them dry and lay them out on a tea towel or a mesh or something along those lines and turn them daily until they're completely dry. Then all you need to do is pop them in a glass jar with a label, type of seed, date, and store them in a cool, dark place with low humidity. I would recommend glass over a plastic tub for this, just because plastic's better at capturing that humidity, which we don't want, and mice and other little critters can also chew through plastic. So you just want to give your seeds the best start in life in glass. So you can also easily propagate your own plants that you've grown at home or supermarket herbs and veg by taking a cutting or just popping them into some water, which blew my mind on discovering that. And this will work for the bulbs of vegetables like celery, spring onions, bok choy, lettuce, and for all kinds of kitchen herbs. So I've just got a quite sad looking celery here. I hope you can all see that. And I was just going to give you a quick demo on really how easy it is to propagate. So if you're using a vegetable, you're just going to want to cut off the root end and pop that in a jar of water. So I'm just literally going to cut that off and pop it in here. And then you're just going to want to pop that in a sunny location, like on a windowsill. And after a couple of weeks, the plant will start to regrow from the root and grow upwards out of the jar. And you can literally just keep cutting bits off that as and when you need them. Might be a bit of a slog for celery, I have to say, but in terms of things like spring onions, it can be really nice if you just want to use those ends as a garnish, to have that on the go to use as needed. In terms of herbs, I have got some rosemary here to demo on. And if you're wanting to take a cutting from something like rosemary, you're going to want to cut a healthy stem off a bush in your garden or somewhere locally to you, or you might buy a bag from the supermarket. That's fine too, but you're going to want to get about this much, about 3 to 10 centimeters, I'd say. And you're going to want to cut it off if you're taking it from the bush just below the node. So that's this point here or any of these points where the leaves spring from. Once you've got that stem, you're going to want to strip it about 2/3 so that just this top part remains so that all the energy for growing can be concentrated there. So literally just strip it like this and pop it into a jar of water, as with the celery, just like that. This could probably do with being a bit shorter, but you get the gist. And then again, just pop that in a jar on your windowsill. You're going to want to keep the water fresh. And yeah, you'll begin to see roots growing in a couple of weeks' time. And then once there's quite a thick kind of root network growing, you can actually move that into some compost, and you'll have a whole new plant. So that's, yeah, a nice thing to do. And it's always gratifying when you get free herbs, I find. So next on to possibly my favorite thing I'm going to talk about, which is foraging. Now, it might sound a little bit whimsical, but foraging is such a great thing to do and a really amazing way to get outside and connect with your food and your local environment. There are so many wild greens growing right on your doorstep, I promise you, wherever you live, that are super nutritious and totally free. As I mentioned, I live in London and I'm constantly amazed by how many edible and delicious plants there are growing all around me, that are, most often just completely overlooked as weeds. So there's things like nettles, wild garlic, fennel, sorrel, dandelions, all sorts, elderberries, mushrooms, the list goes on. So some of my all-time favorite things to make with foraged bits and bobs is nettle soup, which is delicious. Duck leaf and squash risotto. Duck leaves are quite bitter, but they pair really nicely with a kind of creamy risotto. Elderberry syrup, really perfect for this time of year, really nice boost to the immunity and kind of gives hot Ribena vibes on a winter's night. And then sloe gin as well, if you like a little tipple. Very delicious, really easy to make. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have the time to indulge in this topic as fully as I would like to, but there are tons of amazing books out there you can learn all about edible plants from and how to forage sustainably. Here are some of those, some of my favorites at least, but there are hundreds of recipes online as well. Although, do be sure if you're going to go down the foraging route to get hold of a plant identification book and just double and triple check that the plants you've gathered really are edible. And also would advise not picking next to roads because the exhaust is not particularly nice to eat or not particularly good for you either. A really nice way to get started is to start off looking for easily identifiable plants that don't have any nasty lookalikes that can just take the initial sort of apprehension out of it a little bit because you'll know that you're not going to poison yourself, basically. Next, I'm just going to say a little bit about storing food. Just a couple of quick tips on this. Firstly, reuse all your containers. So I find things like jars, olive jars, honey jars, that kind of thing. Big yogurt pots and takeaway boxes are perfect for storing leftovers, and they're also really helpful for organizing things as they sit in your fridge. Yeah, not much more on that point, but it's sort of the first part of reduce, reuse, recycle. Think about how you can use something in a different way before you condemn it to the recycling. Secondly, when it comes to covering bowls and plates for popping in the fridge or even wrapping sandwiches, it's really great to use beeswax food wraps. These are just squares of cotton fabric dipped in beeswax, which you can shape to an object with the warmth of your hands. Um, Beeswax is naturally antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antifungal, which makes it really great for food storage. And these wraps are brilliant sustainable alternatives to cling film, tinfoil, things like that, as they are reusable for a start and then ultimately biodegradable when you're done with them. They're pretty readily available these days in shops and online. In fact, we have popped one in your goodie bag. But I find them to be quite pricey to buy, so I prefer to make them myself. So here are some, I hope you can see, that I made recently. Um, and it's a really fun process. Very nice and creative, not too challenging. And it's a really lovely way, I think, to add a personal touch to your kitchen, as well as they make really great presents, I would like to think, having made a lot for my family this year. But lovely little things to receive, and you can really personalize them. I've included a how-to video on how to make these again in my resources. So do have a look at that if you're interested. Another really nice thing about these is you can also re-wax them once they start to lose their shape after about 6 months. So really, you can just keep them going until they're really on their last legs. Another thing to make or buy if you like baking is an elasticated fabric bowl cover. Again, a really easy alternative to cling film, and quite lovely looking, I think, as well. And so I've popped a DIY for that in the resources as well. So on to prepping food now. Sustainable eating encourages us to use healthy cooking methods. I'm not going to focus on this too much as we've already had Rachel's healthy eating session, but I would like to recommend a couple of great cookbooks, largely veggie cookbooks, if you're looking sort of where to get started with this. So first off, there's Anna Jones' One Pot Pan Planet, which is packed full of seasonal plant-based recipes using only one pot, as the name would suggest, which, as I'll get into in a minute, is really great for reducing your energy consumption. We've also got The Green Roasting Tin by Rukmini Ayer. This one has been a staple for me for a good few years now. It's half vegan, half veggie, and all the recipes are really quick and straightforward and only require one roasting tin, so it saves on washing up as well, which is always a plus to me. And finally, we've got The Whole Vegetable by Sophie Gordon, which is organized by season and lets you know what's available throughout the year and how to get the most out of your veg by using every part of it. There are also loads of websites out there. If you literally just Google sustainable recipes, heaps will come up. I've included a couple of sites again at the end, if you'd like to just have a browse of those. But what I'm predominantly going to focus on in this section is how to save energy and money while you're cooking. So the way we cook is something we each have a lot more control over, right, than the broader issue of how food is grown and transported. Combined, cooking and keeping our food cool makes up a staggering 30.6% of the electricity used in the UK on average, in UK homes on average, rather. So that's a massive chunk. But there are luckily some easy ways to save energy in the kitchen that will save you money too. So first off, you can switch to a green energy provider, which will mean your electricity is coming from a green source rather than fossil fuels. To be more energy efficient, you can cook for more than one person at a time. Or if you live by yourself, you can always batch cook and, double or triple the ingredient amounts and then freeze those meals for later. Making one pot meals, as I mentioned, not only saves on washing up and on water and cleaning products too, but saves energy as you're only using the one heat source. Now, I'm just going to quickly run through different kitchen appliances and a couple of ways you might be able to save energy using them. So starting off with the hob. If you're needing to boil water for cooking, try and do that in the kettle rather than on the hob and only use as much water as you need, as not only is that much more energy efficient, but it will also save you time. And be sure to pick the right hob and the right pan for the job. Make sure that your pan fully covers the hob, so there isn't escaped energy around the edges. And a bigger hob will take longer to heat up than a smaller hob, so a smaller pan, rather a small full pan is more energy efficient than a larger, emptier one. And steamers are also great for cooking several things at once on one heat source. And as you're cooking, if you can, be sure to cover the pan with a lid, as you'll use 8 times less energy to heat your food that way. And finally, when you're cooking, have a go at turning the heat off a couple of minutes before your food is fully cooked, as the residual heat will actually continue to cook your food, and you'll save energy that way. For the oven, if you're using the oven, consider what else you could cook at the same time while it's turned on. So, for example, you could pop your dinner in and alongside that, toast some veg seeds or make some breadcrumbs. Most modern ovens only take about 5 to 10 minutes to heat up, so ignore what the recipe book says and use your common sense and don't start to preheat the oven really until you're almost ready to use it. You might also want to think about how you cut your food, as the smaller you cut it, the quicker it will cook. And if you can, resist opening the oven door to check on your food. I'm terribly guilty of that. But if you can, look through the glass instead, where possible. And for fridge freezers, never put hot food directly into the fridge or freezer, as this is going to raise the overall temperature of the fridge, meaning that more energy is going to be required to bring that temperature back down again. So on that same kind of note, allow your food to cool fully before you put it in the fridge, and don't keep the door open for extended periods, as again, that will have the similar effect of rising that inside temperature. On average in the UK, we keep our fridges at 7 degrees. So check your thermostat and turn that down to 5, and it will mean that your food keeps longer. In terms of kitchen appliances, coffee machines, blenders, electric whisks, that kind of thing. If you're buying new, make sure that you're buying energy efficient appliances. So all new appliances have a rating from A++ to G. And the Energy Saving Trust has a lot of information about this and can tell you where your appliance sits on the scale. There's a link to their website in the slides at the end. So check that out if you're interested. But also slow cookers and microwaves as appliances themselves are super efficient ways of cooking and reheating food, super energy efficient. So yeah, they're great to use. And also be sure to switch off any appliances at the plug socket when you're not using them so that they're not consuming energy passively. Finally, washing up. If you wash up in the sink, do buy a bowl if you haven't got one already to catch and reuse that water. But if you have a dishwasher, do use it as generally an energy efficient dishwasher is more eco-friendly than hand washing. Okay, powering on, we're going to look at reducing food waste. So a sustainable eater minimizes their food waste as far as is possible. And a great way to start off doing that is by ignoring sell-by dates. So sell-by dates relate to the date by which the shop needs to sell the product, not the date that it needs to be consumed by you. So instead of looking for use-by dates, have a look for, sorry, sell-by dates, have a look for use-by dates, which are generally later. But as Rachel mentioned in her talk, you do really want to observe the use by date, particularly if you're going through treatment and your immunity might be a little bit lower. Next, another of my favorites, fermentation. So fermentation is the breakdown of carbs like starch and sugar by bacteria and yeast. And it's an ancient method of food preservation used across the globe, which makes the most of summer abundance to prepare for winter shortages. But fermenting food is also a great way of preserving your food in the present day too. And it's a really lovely way to create something new and delicious from excess veg that might otherwise go to waste, whether you've harvested it from your garden or bought it in bulk for the supermarket. And it's also a lot of fun too. Now, well-fermented foods are brilliant for your gut health and immunity as they're rich in probiotics and vitamin C and iron and zinc and all that good stuff. Again, if you're currently undergoing chemotherapy, this is one of those things that I would check with your doctor about before giving it a go. Some of my favorite ferments to make are sauerkraut and kimchi. Both are delicious, particularly if you're into tangy, slightly fizzy foods. Um, and you really can use any vegetable you have for this as long as it's relatively crunchy and grateable. So things like cabbage, carrots, beetroot, garlic, radish, they're all perfect. And you can actually also include leafy greens too. So, for example, this jar you can see on the left here is a jar of foraged greens kimchi that I made in the springtime. And I included some baby hawthorn leaves and 3 corn leek in that, which I foraged from the marshes near where I live. Alongside, I think I can see cabbage and radish and maybe a bit of red onion in there as well. So, really, anything will do. And again, there are heaps of different recipes online, but if you're looking for a book, I would recommend this one here, Fermentation by Asa Simonson. And yeah, as with anything, once you've got the technique down, you can really start to freestyle with what you include, and it's a lot of fun. So my next point is to make sure you're using everything. There are always uses for parts of fruit, veg, even meats that we don't necessarily see as worth eating or using, but that historically would have been commonplace to make the most of. So I think a great example of this is saving your veg scraps to make stock. This is something that I do. I just keep a bag in the freezer, plastic bag, and each time I'm preparing a meal, I'll just add my veg offcuts into the bag until it's full. So that's things like onion and garlic skins, the ends of carrots, celery, herb stems, all that sort of thing. Equally, if I have a slightly wilted vegetable in the fridge that's no longer particularly appealing, I'll chop that up and add it in too, just to add a bit of bulk. I do avoid leafy greens for this generally, and also anything that would be too bitter for a stock. So brassicas, basically kale, broccoli, that sort of thing. And I also like to save Parmesan rinds, again in a bag in the fridge, as I just pop a couple of those in every time I'm making a stock, and it really adds a nice sort of body and kind of umami flavor to the stock, which I think is really nice. And also the bones of any meat that I've been eating or meat scraps, that kind of thing. Again, can just add some extra flavor if you eat meat. Making a stock is really simple. You literally just shove your bag of veg ends into your biggest saucepan, cover it with water, and then bring that to a boil. And then reduce the heat to a low and simmer for anywhere between about 3 to 6 hours. And then when you're done, all you need to do is strain that through a cheesecloth is my preference, but you could use a sieve and then bottle it up. And I get loads of bottles. I probably get anywhere between 3 to 6 liters of stock maybe every time I do it. And I'll just dedicate a freezer drawer to this stock and pop it in the freezer and then bring it out as and when I need it. And it's really handy to have on hand. So once you start to delve into the sustainability sphere online, you discover more and more things that you can use that you never even thought of, like saving water you've used to rinse rice, for example, to feed your plants. Apparently, they really like that. And something I'll come on to a little bit later, saving your lemon skins, lemon rinds to make homemade cleaning solutions. But for now, I'm just going to speak a little bit about reducing your food waste by freezing or repurposing expiring food. So just to run through a couple of ideas you might want to try. For any bread that you have that's going stale, you can blitz this into breadcrumbs and freeze them until you'd like to use them. Or you can tear stale bread into soups, which makes it really nice and creamy. Or chop it up and bake it into some croutons. Or if it's not too far past its best, you could use it as the base of a bread salad like panzania or fattoush. For potatoes, you're first off going to want to store them in a dark, dry place in a breathable cloth or paper bag to avoid them sweating and going green. If they get those little sprouts that seem almost inevitable, you can just cut them off and use them as normal, and they'll be absolutely fine. If you've got any leftover cooked potatoes, you can fry those up with any other excess veg you might have to make a bubble and squeak, or grate the potatoes to give them new life in the form of a potato cake or latke. And equally, you can also do this by mashing, just mash them up and form them into little patties that you can fry, or just freeze that mash until you'd like to use it. There are so many different options with potatoes. Onto milk. To elongate the life of milk, you're going to need to freeze it before its best before date. But if you don't get there in time, then you can still make scones with slightly soured milk. Or you can add it to a soup again to add a certain richness. Or you can make it into a bechamel sauce, yogurt, kefir. My favorite thing to do is to make paneer. So paneer, for anyone who doesn't know, is a soft cheese that's often used in Indian cooking, and I personally love it in a curry. It's also very easy to make, which is a nice plus. All you need to do is bring your milk to the boil in a saucepan and then add a few teaspoons or tablespoons probably of lemon or vinegar, lemon juice or vinegar to make the curds and whey separate. And then you just strain that through a cheesecloth, twist it in the curds into a ball, pop them on a chopping board, say, and then sit something heavy like a Dutch oven on top for a few hours to just squeeze out that excess liquid. And you'll come out the other side with a gorgeous homemade cheese. Yeah, that's a really lovely one. Another favorite, which just feels like alchemy to me, is turning expiring cream into butter. So pop your cream in a jam jar and just shake for 10 minutes. And it feels like nothing's happening, but then suddenly there'll be a kind of thud. And that is the cream separating out into buttermilk and butter. I'm constantly amazed by that one. It feels super magical to me. For any bagged salads, spinach, leafy greens, that sort of thing that need using up, you can blitz them into a pesto. Just pop them in your blender with some olive oil, lemon juice, any kind of nuts. Pine nuts are nice, but walnuts, anything like that's lovely. And a hard cheese if you have it to hand. And this will mean that they keep in the fridge for a week longer at least. Or slightly wilted greens, just add them to a stir fry, soup, smoothie. They'll taste lovely. If you want to keep your crunchy veg in good nick for as long as possible, so cauliflower, carrots, that sort of thing, you're going to want to store them in the fridge in a container of cold water, and that keeps them really crisp and makes them last up to a week longer as well. And for any veg with big seeds like squash, pumpkins, just dig those out, wash off the flesh, toss them with some olive oil, bit of salt, and bake them in the oven for 20 minutes. And they're then again another delicious little addition to any meal, and they're also full of fiber and protein. And finally, onto herbs. If you store them in a jar of water in the sort of milk bottle door compartment of the fridge, reminds you to use them, which I always forget to do. So it's nice to have them sort of immediately visible, and they'll also last longer that way. You can also chop them up and freeze them in ice cube trays for later, or dry them out on a tea towel to really preserve them for much longer. And then you can just sprinkle them into your meals as you would any other dried herb. Now that's just the tip of the iceberg, but sadly all I have time for. So finally, just coming on to composting. Composting your food waste is a really fantastic way to return it to the earth. So you can either do this through the council if yours offers a food recycling scheme, or you can make compost yourself at home to use in your garden. It's a relatively easy to set up a bokashi bin system or worm composting bin at home. They both work in gardens and balconies alike, and they're both readily available to buy online. I've got a link in the resources to a BBC Food article about these, which sort of goes more into the details of their benefits, the benefits of each system, sort of weighing them up against each other. So if that is something you'd like to do, I suggest giving that a read. But if the DIY approach doesn't appeal to you, there's also a great website called Share Waste, again in the resources, which helps you to recycle your kitchen scraps by connecting you with neighbours, people who live locally to you, who are either already composting or they keep farm animals who would get a great meal from your food waste. So they'll take your waste off your hands and everyone benefits. So that's a really nice system. Last but not least, just a quick note on cleaning and cookware. If you're wanting to cut back on single-use cleaning products, I would really recommend investing in some reusable kitchen cloths, which can go in the washing machine, rather than using those sort of one-use J cloths or foam sponges. Although from experience, you can actually put those in the wash quite a few times before they disintegrate. As you'll find, I believe, in your goodie bags, you have an eco sponge. And you can also get these from quite a lot of retailers these days, and they're made from biodegradable materials, which are much better for the environment. I think I saw them in Tesco's the other day. But in terms of your cleaning solutions, a lot of what you'll find in supermarkets is packed full of harmful chemicals, which, once they're washed down the drain, seep into our waterways and can contaminate them. And they're also often quite harsh on the skin and also can pollute the air you're breathing. So not the best. But luckily, the average kitchen cupboard already has most of the natural ingredients you'll need to clean your home, which makes the swap to more environmentally friendly ways of cleaning a little bit easier and more cost effective. So one of the homemade cleaning products I make most regularly is a multi-purpose surface cleaner. I've got mine right here. It's in just an old spray bottle. So just get yourself an old spray bottle, fill it with about a 1:5 ratio of white wine vinegar to warm water. And I actually like to infuse my vinegar beforehand with lemon peels in a jar. I've got one here for a couple of weeks beforehand, and that just gives a solution a really nice natural lemony smell, but it also helps to boost its cleaning properties, as lemon kills bacteria and is a brilliant degreaser. So that's just a nice addition and does take the edge off the vinegar a little bit. It's also nice, or can be nice, up to you, to add a few drops of your favorite essential oil for a bit more of a pleasing scent. Tea tree is really nice for this, as that's antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, all of the antis. But just be careful when you are using essential oils, as they are very strong and they can be irritant to the skin. So I'd recommend wearing some gloves if you're worried about that. And also do check that your choice of essential oil is pet safe, as many are toxic to cats and dogs, and we don't want any sad pets on our hands. So natural recipes like these do take a little bit more elbow grease than shop bought options, or they can at least. But they are so much cheaper and do a spectacular job nonetheless. A bottle of white vinegar is, I think last time I bought one, it's about 30p from Tesco's versus what, £4 something you're going to pay for a product off the shelf. But you might need to leave them a little bit longer to do their magic on the surface. So maybe just spray them on and leave them for a couple of minutes and then wipe them away, and they should work absolutely fine. Another brilliant natural cleaning tip for kettles is cleaning your kettle using citric acid. So literally all you need to do is fill your kettle half full with water and bring it to a boil. Pop in your citric acid, about 75 grams will do, and then let that sit for about 15 minutes to work its magic. Then all you need to do is pour that down the sink and your kettle will be lime scale free. You might want to just run a couple of boils through your kettle after that. It's perfectly safe to consume citric acid, but you don't really want a tangy tasting cup of tea if you can avoid it. Again, tons more easy natural creaming recipes available online. A really great resource is the Greenpeace Cleaning Guide, which I've linked to at the end again. Like the fermentation and loads of the other things I've talked about today, it's just a really lovely way again to be a bit playful at home and to personalize your kitchen. And it always makes me feel like a kid again, kind of making potions with illicit toiletries in the bathroom. Takes me back to using up all my mum's perfume as a kid. Of course, there are shop bought buy alternatives to any cleaning product that you might need. There are brands rather like Method and eCover, which are brilliant. And you can also buy those in bulk at zero waste stores if you want to stock up on those in advance. Just a quick note to finish up on cookware. If you need something for your kitchen, it's more sustainable and cheaper in the long run to buy something that's secondhand but better quality over a cheaper supermarket replacement with a shorter lifespan. So I like to buy kitchenware in charity shops. You can find some really nice, unique bits. And there are also the sort of online equivalents like eBay and Gumtree that are also full of great deals. And just a word on recycling to finish up. Just be sure really that you're recycling properly for the area you live in, and wash everything before you put it in the bin. It seems like every council does things slightly differently, which can get quite confusing. So do check your specific local council's website. But as a rule of thumb, paper, cardboard, tins, glass, hard plastics can all be recycled. But a lot of those softer plastics that we'd like to be recyclable aren't. So that's where the aspirational recycling, as it's known, comes in, which is a very real phenomenon in my household, definitely. So those are things like toothpaste tubes, crisp packets, medicine packets, pet food pouches, salad bags, all that sort of thing. For an exhaustive list of what you can and can't put in your blue bin, I've included the Waste and Resource Action Programme's guidelines at the end, which is a list drawn up nationally by the recycling industry. So they do really know what they're talking about. And I'm sure that will make some thrilling bedtime reading for you all. So yeah, on that note, I've finished with my part. Thank you all very much for your attention. I know I've covered a lot, but just to reiterate, we will be emailing all these slides and the resource list round to everybody after the workshop, including everything I've mentioned. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the floor to you guys. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to share, have any tips of your own, any questions, anything like that,